Peace.
Aaron, what's
Like,
going on, brother? How you feeling today?
I can't complain, man. I can't complain. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I feel important.
Did I do a good job? Did I do a good job?
You did indeed. You did indeed. I
Appreciate it, brother.
appreciate
Because
the love.
yeah, when we heard you were coming on, I said, I know that play. And then the Penn State just brought back memories of you just sacking all the Maryland quarterbacks. So thank you for being here, brother. I appreciate
Hey, man. Charge it to my career, not my heart.
it. Hey, man, anybody from the city doing big things, we love it no matter where they at, man. Dre, your boy's on, man. You go ahead, throw up your step, brother.
Hey man,
We
I
already
want
showed that love, you know what I mean?
I
Going
want to
on,
get
Fi. How you doing, Fred?
hey good, Fred. I want to get right to it, man. What did you think about the Noobs performing last night at Usher during Usher's halftime performance?
Bro, that was dope, man. It was definitely a nice little surprise in there. People don't show the Noops enough love during the big stages, man. So it was good to be able to see a couple brothers in there putting on for the frat. You know what I'm saying? Usher had some tight shoulders, man, but he gave everybody some shimmy action. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was dope though. Like, all jokes aside, anytime on such a big stage, I think that people were able to see that a little bit when Beyonce had put out like her Renaissance project, and she highlighted a lot of HBCUs marching bands and had a lot of the sorority representation through that project. I think that Usher definitely did his version of that with his performance. You were able to see HBCU marching bands, kind of center out with about 5 seconds. I mean, about a minute into the performance, I'm sitting there like, man, would he hire a whole Soleil team out there with him? You seen him shooting people through rockets, you know what I'm saying, into the crowd and all kind of other crazy stuff. So it was a dope performance, man. I definitely was proud to see the brothers up there putting on.
Byron.
Oh no, I was going to ask him. I guess we can, since we kind of started with the Super Bowl. As someone who played in the league, what do you think about how the league has been this season with a lot of the things that they're doing, and just your thoughts on the overall, I guess, new dynasty of the Chiefs? Are you a Patrick Mahomes guy? Who do you enjoy watching? What are some of the things that since you've left the league you've seen that you like and maybe don't like?
Uh, I mean, Pat is Pat, man. At the end of the day, man, like when he decides to put his cape on, it's few players in the history of this game that have his level of poise and the different angles that he throws from. Just the obviously, in Baltimore we get a little bit spoiled, being able to watch Lamar out there every single week running around, making cats look stupid. But I think that Patrick never really gets enough credit for his elusiveness and um, the fact that he's able to escape a lot of the rush schemes against him to either make the impossible throw, or in a situation like last night where he just decides, man, look, if it's not there, I'm just gonna use my feet and get it on the ground on my own. So it would have been dope to be able to see Lamar get into the dance and be able to see the Ravens on the home stage as somebody that is born and raised here. Despite the fact that I played in the league, um, I definitely pull for, what I mean, the Ravens to be successful. I love to be able to see all of the narratives that, Lamar is rewriting, through his own talent in his career, you know what I'm saying? But obviously the Chiefs put an end to that in the AFC Championship game. But, I told people, everybody that pretty much asked me, I said, I don't really have a dog in this fight, but if I'm a root for anybody, you know what I'm saying? I want to see Pat go out there and continue to add to his extensive list of accolades, and he definitely didn't disappoint last night. But as a former defensive player, man, it was definitely dope to see the way that the defenses were out there balling. Man, that was probably the most um, defense centered Super Bowl that we've seen in the last few years. So, for everybody that talks about this game being driven by offense, and there's no way to play defense in this year's NFL. I think that you saw that narrative rewritten a lot, throughout these playoffs and ultimately throughout the Super Bowl game.
I got a question I want to ask, Mr. Maybin. How did you get into football when you were younger?
I mean, growing up in West Baltimore, you're deprived of a whole lot of options. You know what I'm saying? If you're young and athletic and gifted, usually at some point somebody's gonna stick a basketball or a football in your hands and see what you can do. Um, it happened to be for me at a very young age. I started playing at about 5 years old. I played flag, and then ended up playing for the Northwood Rams, which in Baltimore City is a very well-known, Pop Warner League, is known for going to national championships and getting a lot of accolades and all of that kind of stuff. So, I was kind of baptized into it very early. And, once it was kind of established that I had some talent and that, there was a potential future in the game for me, it's kind of already written. People start saying, "Hey, we got to get him with this coach. We got to get him in this program. We got to get him in front of these eyes, and we got to get him opportunity to take his game to the next level." So, I was blessed to find myself in some fortunate situations, have a lot of great mentors that were able to help me to ascend to the level that I was fortunate enough to get to in my career.
Well, let me follow up with that. You went to college at Penn State. How do you feel about Penn State and the program moving forward?
I think that, for one, I mean, it's a layered question. When I played at Penn State, I was one of the last classes of, the great Joe Paterno. The squad that I played on before I left and came into the league was his last squad to win a Big Ten championship. We played in the Rose Bowl against USC. Um, we did a lot of great things during my time there, and I kind of feel like I was a part of kind of a changing of the guard as far as, the old school traditionalism that Penn State was known for, and where the school is at today. The class that I was a part of was largely one of the first classes in the history of the school that was recruited almost extensively. I mean, almost exclusively in inner cities across the East Coast. So most of our guys that were in my class came from not just Maryland, but Virginia, Jersey, New York. Bunch of young black kids that knew nothing about the scope of what we were going into, but largely talented enough to help to rewrite um, a lot of the age old kind of things that the school was known for. So we were kind of seen as rebels coming into it. But with the success that myself and many of my classmates had, you had, I think out of my class, you had at least like 10 first round picks or something crazy like that. We had guys all over the spot that were just, hella talented, and, were able to achieve a lot of great things in our careers. Going from that till after I left Penn State, seeing how, the wheels kind of fell off once, all of the allegations from the stuff connected with Sandusky and all of the penalties that were levied against the school, Joe losing his job and passing away soon afterwards. The school was in a crazy place for a few years, and largely it was tough to watch, because not just myself, but a lot of the guys that were a part of that class that I just talked about weren't necessarily really embraced by the school to come back and continue working with the young guys and to maintain the tradition that um, we had a lot to do with maintaining um, after Joe passed away. It's not really until maybe really the last few years since Franklin has been there that he's been intentional about bringing a lot of those guys back onto the staff as coaches and back into relationship with the school and the organization itself through working with the kids and having a presence on campus, you know what I mean, being there on game days and things like that. So it's good to see them turning a corner from that perspective. Would love to be able to see them get to the level where they're once again getting the big wins against the Ohio States and the Michigans and contention for Big Ten titles and things of that nature. But I think that they're on their way to being able to do that with a lot of the guys that they've brought back into the fold and the way that they've kind of been intentional about reestablishing that tradition of excellence there.
Mr. Aaron Maybin. So 2009, gosh, we talked about 15 years ago.
Indeed.
So the NFL has gone through quite a bit of changes since then, mainly on the defensive side of the ball. How difficult do you think it would have been for a player such as yourself to play in this era of defense? Because I heard you was talking about how well both these defenses played, despite the NFL being more geared to offense. But how well do you think you would have been able to adapt to the offensive led NFL going on now?
I think I would have been fine, to be perfectly honest. Honestly, I feel as though I came along way too early. You know what I mean? When I left school and entered the draft, everybody was looking for a Sean Merriman. Everybody was looking for, a 6'4", 280-pound, you know what I mean, edge rusher that, sets the edge and that, can still disrupt the passer. They hadn't really seen a Von Miller yet. They hadn't really seen a Alden Smith yet. They hadn't really seen a lot of the. If you look at just in terms of like build and athleticism, a lot of the edge rushers in today's league look a lot more like me than most of the edge rushers when I came out of school. So most teams were looking, even when they would draft a guy like me or bring a guy like me into their program, they would try to make us into what they felt like the archetype of an edge rusher was up until that point. Everybody was looking for a Bruce Smith or a Reggie White. And if you didn't fit into that archetype, a lot of coaches and defensive coordinators didn't necessarily know what to do with you. In many cases, I feel like that was for the most part, the reason why I was never able to find my stride with the team that drafted me, the Buffalo Bills. It wasn't until I got to New York and played for Rex Ryan that he knew exactly how to utilize me and how to maximize on my talent within the scheme of his defense. And I think that you saw, not just because of myself, but because of many of the players that I just named and so many others that came afterwards, that became the new trend. Now everybody's looking for an undersized but freakishly athletic edge rusher that they can plug into their defense to give them a shot in the arm whenever they need it. So I think that it's part of the growing pains that the evolution of the game brings about sometimes that people don't necessarily see from a fan's perspective. But now we're at a point where, because everything's so offensively driven, you need the other side of that coin now. The way that offenses are gearing up to be explosive, you need defenses that are also just as explosive. You need edge rushers that are able to make these big offensive linemen look silly. You need guys that can set the edge, but that can also cover tight ends and running backs out of the backfield. And they're expanding on the responsibilities of guys that play that position. So from that standpoint, I think that I would have been good. But in terms of like, a mentality of the game, it is a completely different game that's played now. It was a cardinal sin to send an undersized or a fragile player across the middle of the field when we played. You know what I'm saying? Because you knew he was going to get his head knocked off. It's a little bit different now, but that's what great players do. You adjust. As rules change, you have to adjust the way that you play the game in order to still fit within that framework.
All right. My question is this. Well, actually, two questions. One, have you been back to Penn State since everything happened with that situation with Joe Pa?
Yeah, yeah. It was a while. It took a while. Like I said earlier, when I was at school, I was seen as a rebel. I was seen as kind of like the black sheep when I was there because I did a lot of things that went against the grain of the traditionalism that Joe had established there. I pledged Kappa Alpha Psi during my time there as an athlete. That was a big no-no. You know what I'm saying? And then after I did it, hella guys on the football team went out and pledged like literally the semester afterwards. So I got a lot of the blame for starting that trend again. And then they were, at the end of the day, when you bring a black kid from Baltimore City or any other hood across America into a spot like Penn State, there's going to be an element of culture shock. There's going to be an element of uh, uh, going against the grain that people in that traditional model of school aren't necessarily used to. And I think that for a while that was seen as like a negative thing. And even how I went about like unapologetically preparing myself for the type of work that I do now within community in cities like Baltimore and across the country. I think that now, not even just from a standpoint of Penn State, but like people that had a problem with the way I was going about doing things now, when they look at my career and they look at the things that we've built and the things that we've created here in the city of Baltimore, it makes a lot more sense to them. Even when I decided to retire, when I did, and do this work full time, even my own family thought I had lost my mind. You know what I mean? Like nobody,
Mhm.
but like it's impossible for most of those people to believe that I was going to be able to make a living out of making art, writing books. You know what I'm saying? Like doing
Right.
philanthropy. Like, how the hell you even going to keep the lights on? Much less, provide for a family. You know what I mean? So, um, that process was something that um, Penn State didn't really necessarily play any kind of factor in my mind. It was kind of out of sight, out of mind. If they don't want me there, I have no desire to be there. But I'll give a lot of credit to Coach Franklin from the second that he got that job. I have a long-standing relationship with him because when he was here at the University of Maryland, he recruited me. Obviously, it wasn't successful. I chose to go to state, but me and him have always had a great relationship. And when he came onto the staff at Penn State, he was intentional about reaching out to former players such as myself and being very clear that he wanted us to be a part of that family, of establishing and reestablishing, that culture, that winning culture that, Joe established, and understanding that in order to do so, he needed to go back and get the Dugs that was instrumental in creating it in the first place, and bring them back into the fold. So since he's been back, man, like, not even just the football team, the entire campus, like, I have an exhibit going on here at the Reginald, I mean, not the Reginald F. Lewis, the Frederick Douglass Museum here in Baltimore. But before that exhibit came back home, one of the first locations that it went to on the national tour that we were just on was Penn State. They brought me back as an honorary captain for one of the games this year, and being able to have that relationship again with the team and the organization has really gone a long way as far as being able to educate these new age college athletes on how to properly take advantage of the NIL and to set themselves up, regardless of whether or not they go to the NFL or continue playing after college, set themselves up for success in their communities. You know what I mean? Set themselves up to have real impact outside of the game. And that was something that when I was in college was never really prioritized. But because folks like myself and so many others that have been there have been intentional about making sure that the coaching staff and boosters, donors, all of those folks know the importance of empowering players rather than just, using them for their physical, economical, and every other type of capital that we can generate from the school. It actually benefits the school to invest in us becoming the type of leaders, even outside of the athletic arena, that we can be. Because ultimately, when we go back into our communities, we're taking what we learned from college and using that to apply in many areas of our lives that lead to creating stronger, safer, more thriving communities.
How
Dope.
do you feel about these NIL deals now that they've come about, and you see more and more players are starting?
I missed the beginning of that, brother. Start that question over, please.
How do you now feel that NIL deals have come about since your days of playing?
I mean, it's changed the game completely. I tell people all the time, if NIL was a thing when I was in school, I never would have left early. You know what I mean? I was a broke black boy from Baltimore when I got to Penn State, and when I decided to declare for the NFL draft, I was still a broke black boy from Baltimore at Penn State. Between Pell Grant, which is gone in about a week or two, and the fact that, like, even as an artist, so to speak, right? Like, I've been an artist my entire life. So, when I got to school, I decided to double major, and I majored in broadcast journalism and integrative arts. I knew that at some point, at whatever point my career ended, I knew that I was going to be an artist and I was going to be invested in community. Now, had I had the opportunity to monetize my name, image, and likeness while in school, I'd have been a millionaire by my second year of college. Easy. You know what I mean? Like, I tell people all the time, I would have to. So especially like after I pledged, right? Like, when you broke and you in college back in those days, it's illegal for you to monetize any of your own talents or capabilities. So I'm hustling paintings and fraternal nail paddles, all that kind of stuff under the table with whoever I can get to buy something from me, just so I'll have money, just so I could have enough money to go out to the grocery store or to take my lady out to the movies or something. You know what I mean? Like, the decisions that we had to make in terms of like preservation were not decisions that benefited us as athletes, as individuals, as human beings, right? So, I'm trying to scrounge together like, $100 so I can go and refill my refrigerator. When, if I was playing in today's business, any of the stuff that I created, I could sell, I could monetize, I could learn how to prioritize business. I could, learn finance and all of these things in a real time framework where as I'm going through school, I'm learning things, I'm making mistakes, I'm getting hands-on experience on how to run a business, how to scale it, so that by the time I'm leaving school, I'm not leaving just trying to get into a field. I'm leaving with a leg up and having already been involved in it since my freshman year, So I'm really intentional when I mentor younger guys that are playing now to make sure that they're asking themselves what they want to do with their lives outside of this game, and make sure that they're intentional about using the game the same way the game and everybody connected to it is going to use you. is going to make sure that you're setting yourself up so you can be the captain of your own ship, and you're not hiring people that don't look like you and don't come from places that you come from to tell you how to spend your money, to save your money, to start businesses, to do all like. You don't need anybody to do that for you nowadays. You can actually set yourself up and empower yourself if you have the forward thinking to make sure that you're intentional about getting everything you can get out of that experience.
Okay, being a broke black boy from Baltimore, how was that process of going from Penn State to the NFL draft and being a first round draft pick? Like, how does that transition for you? Or how did that transition for you?
It was crazy, man. Like, obviously, you go into a different stratosphere after that moment. The hardest part of it for me wasn't just like, feel the feeling of like living in a fishbowl, because you get comfortable with that when you're in college, knowing that like for the most part everybody at the school knows who you are, you know what I mean, knows what you have the potential to become at some point, and there are certain folks that only see you like most black men in America. They see you through the lens of your utility. What can I get out of you? What can I extract from you? All of that. But it gets different once you get drafted. In any room you go into, you start seeing people look down at their phones and Googling who you are, pulling up your net worth, and then you see the sparkle in their eye. You know what I mean? You see oh, I can use this person for this. I can get this from this person. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yep.
That for me was the toughest part of it, because ultimately, even in my life now, I'm a servant. You know what I mean? I serve people all day, every day for the most part. So even back then, that was still on my heart, but you get a lot more jaded when you're in situations and constantly feeling like people are looking at you only through the lens of what they can extract from you. So that for me was the most difficult part of the transition. That, and the fact that, like, every team I played on until I got to New York, essentially wanted me to disassociate myself as much as possible from my roots and where I came from. Like everybody had a problem with the fact that I still lived in Baltimore during the off season, that, on any given day you were liable to see me on somebody's street corner, with a whole bunch of folks that got rap sheets that are a mile long. You know what I'm saying? Every time I would come back for OTAs, for training camp, for mini camps, I always have to answer 100 questions about why I chose to do things the way that I did. And that bothered me, So that's just a part of the growing pains that most young athletes end up going through at some point when they make that jump.
How'd you get into art? That's the question. How'd you transition from the NFL to get into art? Because you took that leap. I mean, you did a cabinet, really. I mean,
Yeah, well, I was an artist first. You know what I mean? I was creating art before I could form words and speak. You know what I mean? And after losing my mother at a very young age, I was 6 years old when she passed away. That was my first experience with depression, anxiety, all a lot of the buzzwords in the mental health space now that everybody's just starting to get familiar with. I spoke that language very early, or not spoke that language very early, but I had experience with those feelings and situations very early, and the only outlets that I had that made sense to me were athletics and the arts. You know what I mean? So after my mom passed away, I wasn't the type of kid to really talk about what I was experiencing or what I was feeling, but creatively I would address those things. So I might not be able to tell somebody that, hey, I was up all night last night because I had a dream about my mom and I couldn't go back to sleep. And you know what I mean? I cried myself to sleep when I finally did get to bed. And you know what I mean? Like in Baltimore, amongst my peers, it wasn't really the space for a young kid to have those kind of conversations. But if I were to create a piece of artwork that articulated that exact same experience, all of a sudden it wasn't just okay for me to express that, but people would say, yo, this is dope. Like, you made this? Like I know your experience is something that's terrible, but yo, this is dope. Like, you got talent. Like, that was one of the first times that I actually felt celebrated for something that had nothing to do with my athletic prowess, you know. And I got addicted to it early, man. Like, the idea of using the arts as a tool, not just for expression, but when I started studying how the arts have been an integral part of the Black experience, not just in America, but across the world. You know, um, when you look at any form of activism that Black people have ever participated in, the forefront of that messaging is the arts. You know, whether you go all the way back to the Negro spirituals that were sung during the time of enslavement, to, you know, jazz and its influence and impact on society, to the early rock and roll, and then the visual arts, you know, the art of Emory Douglas, who was the artist of the Black Panther Party, that did all of the artwork that you would see in the Black Panther newspaper, and all of the things that all of the pens that people would go around wearing, like the messaging on all of the posters. Like, art was everything as I started to dive into the history of how we got here. And when you start talking about, well, now that we know how we got here, well, what do we do? Where do we go from here? How do we change these things? The messaging about how you do those things is conveyed through the arts. That's how hip hop was first formed. That's how, you know, Black literature became to be so celebrated. And once I realized the impact and the power of storytelling, um, I was just as intentional about making sure that I utilized my platform, no matter how big or small it was at the time, to speak to those conditions and to create art that narrated the experience, not just of myself as an individual, but of Black Baltimore, of my family, of my ancestors, of all of the people that I served and mentored on a communal level. I would tell those stories through my work.
Well, let me follow up. Since you talked about your art, what was the impact of Ernie Barnes on your art and your NFL career?
So, aside from my artistic father and mentor, Larry Poncho Brown, Ernie Barnes was the first person that I had ever seen that I saw so much of myself and my story in. Ernie Barnes, for those of you that don't know, was the first former NFL player to become a famous artist. Any of the artwork that you would see on the show Good Times was completed by Ernie Barnes. If you look at the Sugar Shack painting, which was the kind of the showpiece of that show, that's Ernie's work. And Ernie played for the Washington Redskins, and, you know, he was a very talented athlete before he chose to go out on his own as an artist as well. And up until the point that I chose to do the same thing, he was the only one that you could point to that had found success in making that jump. So he was a North Star for me for a very long time, and I was fortunate enough after a certain point to meet his family, his son, who still handles his estate and most of the commerce around his work, and me met each other close to 10 years ago now. And he was a heavy influence on me, just telling me stories about his dad and how and why he did some of the things that he did. So yeah, Ernie Barnes was definitely an inspiration and a North Star of sorts for me when I made that transition.
All right, and I'll conclude with this last question for you, brother. Appreciate you being on. Do you think that the NFL is going to go to an 18th game? And if they do go to an 18th game, that we'll finally be able to have the day after the Super Bowl off finally?
Honestly, I pray that they don't. But with the way that the NFL prioritizes profit over people, it's almost inevitable that at some point that's going to happen. It's just I'll never be a proponent or a advocate of that though, because I mean, look, man, like how much is enough? You know what I'm saying? Like how much money, how much profit is going to be enough for you to extract literally from these players' bodies for it to be enough. Football is a very violent sport. It is built around collision. It is built around car accident level collisions. The human body is not meant to be subjected to that kind of violence on a day-to-day basis. So to add another game on to an already very long season where nobody finishes the season healthy. You know what I mean? Like after training camp, everybody is hurt. And for the next however many months until the end of the season, everybody is hurt in some way, shape, or form. To think that you can add another game to that, knowing what we know about head trauma, knowing what we know now about CTE, knowing what we know now about the repeated trauma that so many players are exposed to just by nature of the violence of the game. It's unsafe, and I'm completely comfortable dying on that hill, knowing that making sure that as many people as possible know that that is unsafe and it's going to contribute to shortening careers and lowering life expectancies once careers end. But, if it's good for the pocketbook, the league is going to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, that was one
And
I could see with that 18th game that pushes it possibly to about President's Day, and then from President's Day, people will probably finally have that day after the Super Bowl that they've so long seeked for.
I get it. You know what I mean? I get from a fan's perspective and from a perspective of the brass of the league why they would want to go for it. But as a former player, as somebody that cares more about players than owners and GMs and anybody else that just got their hand in people's pockets, I want to see players grow old.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see players maintain their sanity. I want to see players not struggle through the rest of their lives after the game is done with them. I want to see players walk away from the game instead of getting carted away from the game. So I'm always going to err on the side of what's best for the human beings that are in the helmets and pads, rather than the human beings that are just prioritizing and profiting off of the humans and pads.
Aaron, how can people keep up with you? I got your website up here. I know they can follow you there. Anything else you want to leave with us before you go? And anything you got coming up as well you want to let the people know about?
Yeah, man. You can keep up with me via my website, via my social media pages. You type in Aaron Maybin or Aaron Maybin Art on pretty much any social media platform. You'll be able to find me in terms of things that we have coming up. As I spoke a little bit about my exhibit. I have one going on at the Frederick Douglass Museum downtown that will be going through the end of March. I have an art residency at the Land of Kush restaurant going on as well. So you'll see a lot of my artwork there locally. And on a communal front, most people, we didn't talk about this at all. So in 2020, myself and another former NFL player, Torrey Smith, opened up a rec center on the west side called the Hilton Rec Center. It was a spot that historically had been a center that served that community for 40, 50 years, but for the last 15 had been sitting vacant until we went about reopening it in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. We just got green lit for a $25 million expansion of that facility and broke ground on that expansion after Thanksgiving break. So we're really looking forward to, once we wrap construction, being able to further amplify the work that we have done through that facility in Baltimore, and being able to service a greater number of youth and community members in that space. And we also just recently started a coalition of different grassroots organizations around the city called Be More United, where we did a youth-led anti-violence campaign last year, and started off this year by doing a little over a week ago our first youth summit, where we brought over 200 youth from around the city, with the emphasis on the kids in South Baltimore, out for a day of trainings with all of our grassroots leaders and organizers around empowering their, not just their voice, but empowering them to start to organize towards making some of the changes in the city that they want to see from a youth-centered perspective. The first one was absolutely amazing. We had over 200 youth attend, and the trainings were powerful, man. The mayor was there. We had many of our politicians, grassroots leaders and organizers, media folks, and everybody else out there pouring resources and love and attention into our youth, and developing them into the leaders that we're going to need tomorrow. And we're actually going to be bringing that youth summit to all the sectors of the city coming in the next calendar year. So you'll see us in North, South, East, and West Baltimore, and Central as well. And the whole idea behind that is to deputize a group of youth leaders across the city, so that whenever people want to know what's going on with the youth in Baltimore, they're not just calling myself and a select few others and asking us to speak for the youth, but now we'll have our designated deputized group of youth leaders that can speak for themselves, that can tell you exactly from the horse's mouth what they're working on, what they're most interested in seeing, and what they're organizing towards, as a cadre of young people that are developed, trained, and guided by the elders to create some of the changes that we desperately need in this city. So those are the things that are, at the top of the totem pole right now in terms of priorities.
Nice. Hey, I just
Yeah,
I,
we
I, I just want
appreciate
to
you,
say,
brother.
One
Go
of
ahead,
them,
Devontae. Go ahead, Devontae.
I just want to say before you get out of here, man. I work for Baltimore City Recreation and Parks, and I know how rough it is in the community. I work. I'm the director at Herring Run Recreation Center in Northeast Baltimore, and what you're doing in the community is huge. Because there's a lot of our youth that can draw, and they are in the performing arts, and they don't have an outlet for it. And as directors, we try our best to bring in different types of programming for performing arts and things like that, because it's bottled up. I'm not sure what you did as a you probably just draw, like, what I'm saying, but there's really not many of us that can help those hone in that type of craft. So
Yeah,
I really
that's
love.
why I'm big on. That's why I'm big on putting it out, on showing them what that process looks like. You know what I mean? Because I'm a multifaceted artist. It's not just my paintings. You know what I mean? Like, I'm also a writer. I'm also a poet. You know what I'm saying? So um, being able to teach our youth what it looks like to self-publish your own book, rather
Yeah,
than going around begging different companies to publish you. You know what I mean? Being able to show them what it looks like to create your own opportunities as an artist. I didn't start off in museums. I didn't start off,
right.
in galleries across the country and across the world. When I came out of college and started, trying to get my work out there and recognized, most people would see NFL player and they would completely discredit you as an artist. They have no interest in even looking at your portfolio, because in their mind, they're thinking of, oh, this jock just picked up a paintbrush and thinks that he's going to. You don't know that I studied this in college, that even before college, I was taking classes at Maryland Institute College of Art when I was
Right.
in middle school. You know what I mean? That I was getting mentored by Larry Poncho Brown and Charles Bibbs and Karen Buster and all of these other nationally renowned and recognized artists. And for a young me, being able to see an example of what it looked like for artists and creatives to live their lives on their own terms, like not having a boss, literally like not answering to anybody but their constituents in the community, the people that were there to patronize their work. You know, nowadays, those are the only folks that I'm accountable to. Can't nobody come in and stop me from doing what I do in community, or they can't come in and stop me from publishing my own work. And, you know, that work over the last decade, after, you know, playing in the NFL, has sustained me and my family and allowed me to invest in community and create opportunities for kids to learn how to do the exact same thing. But for most kids, you just need an example. If you've never met a doctor
That's it.
or a
Only
lawyer,
one.
yeah, if you've never met a doctor or a lawyer, you have no idea that, hey,
Right.
I can be this. These are the steps that I have to take to get there. This is the blueprint that I have to follow, so to speak, to be able to break that glass ceiling into this profession. So being able to serve as an example of that, but not to be up on a pedestal, but to bring it directly to the youth where they are, to go into the neighborhoods where they're living and make sure that those resources are available there is my number one priority.
The NFL was a stepping stone, but art is your passion. Great
Indeed.
stuff, man. Great stuff.
Love it.
Man, appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate y'all for having me
Yes,
on.
sir. We're gonna have to have you come back. But make sure you check out Maybin.com. Check out his support the brother. If you see him out of the community, holler at him. Thank you, man. We'll have you on real, real soon, man. Hopefully, bring you back.
Absolutely.
You know, talk some
Peace.
more things you got going on in the community. Appreciate you, Aaron. Big shout out one more time to Aaron.